Hi, Tjinder. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
Very good, Ethan. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time out and coming on. It's great to speak to you, and I'm looking forward to this episode.
Great, nice to speak to the North.
Well, I usually start by asking, what was your childhood like, and when did music become important to you?
Um, well, my childhood was in Wolverhampton, in a village called Wensfield. It was it was quite a racist time, and it was also a time where the Asian community were very dislocated from the mainstream of life. It was violent at times, but it was also there was a lot of there was a lot of hard work going on in the Asian community, which eventually saw us doing well, obviously in education, and then slowly things turned around, very slowly, um, for us to integrate more into the mainstream of life, and school. I really loved. My father was a headmaster in India, and when he came to England, he was actually nothing. He had to re-educate himself. He had to get different certificates to be able to even teach in England. And whilst he was doing that, he was doing a lot of different jobs like bus conducting and taxiing and anything he could do to pay for the education. And he was actually going to leave. He was in Shepherd's Bush in London. He was going to leave and go back to India. But he came to Wolverhampton, and my uncle there persuaded him to give Wolverhampton a chance. And if that didn't work out, then he could leave. And hence, the family are in Wolverhampton. Um, Not really too much. Music was really came from Sikh devotional music in the temple or the Gurdwara, um, and Punjabi folk music, which was very prevalent in Indian social gatherings, and in particular at weddings. I didn't really do too much delving into English music actually until a very late time. We still had hymns at school, which is quite alien actually looking back at it. But I love the hymns, and I've next to our temple, our first temple was an African Christian denomination. So there was a lot of Christianity going right next to Sikhism in one handy hut of a unit. I've always loved gospel music since, and I at school we all got on. I've got three siblings, and we all got on with each other. All got on with schooling and friends and living in this small village. I played chess a lot when I was younger, and that sort of got me out of Wolverhampton a little and got me going to different towns to play different tournaments, town chess tournaments, and actually our school did very well, so we travelled a lot with that as well. And that probably had quite an impact on my life in terms of wanting to break out of what was there in Wensfield. And actually, it also had a lot of music attached to it as well, because we would listen to music prolifically in the cars as we were travelled to and fro. And that is a long answer. I'm sorry about that, but
No, that's brilliant. I enjoyed that, hearing how your youth really influenced your life because I suppose going to these different chess tournaments and stuff is a bit like touring, really.
to some extent, it was. Yeah, I haven't. I tell you what, I thank you for that because I've not actually looked at it like that. I was in a van doing some handiwork with a friend of mine. It was his van, and that was, I did think, I feel like I'm on tour now. But yes, I suppose chess was a precursor to all that.
Well, over the years, Cornershop have fused together lots of different influences. What were some influences growing up? What were some bands or Indian music that you were into?
Yeah, we had an Asian collection of records, in particular the EMI Angel label, which had a lot of the Punjabi folk 45s. And that would be, well, my favourite Indian group has always been Pachungi Group, who actually lived in Birmingham, and they came over. They worked the land. They were farmers and came from a rural background. Actually, my family is also from a rural background, and my father broke away from that. Um, and they inaugurated themselves as a group that played in the temple, and in particular played Indian weddings. And I loved that music a hell of a lot. It had percussion, it had analog keyboards, it had wonderful raw vocals, it had brilliant tabla and dolki. It had wonderful intros to songs. Bajungi really were it for me, and I saw them as they moved on to getting bigger venues and becoming big stars actually for the Asian community. They were wonderful. It was they were life changing. They changed my life certainly. Um, we obviously listened to a lot of music with Asian videos coming into fashion at that time, VHS videos. In terms of English music, hardly ever got anything. First, the first 7 inch that we had, I think, was Blinded by the Light, not by Springsteen, but by oh God, I've forgotten who they are. Manfred Mann's band. And then the second 7 inch English one that we had was Know Me, Knowing You by ABBA, and the B side was Happier Why, and it started with the rushing in of waves coming onto the sand, and both of those tracks I wore out. And then we slowed. Actually, I must give credit to my elder brother who was in the band with me, but because he got into listening more to music quicker than I did. I was still stuck in the more religious congregations in terms of music. I would go around recording them on cassette and keeping a log of them just for my own pleasure and to give out to my family, and that was that. But um, yeah, white white music came afterwards, and we didn't have a parents' record collection of white music to that was delivered down to us or that we could even go into. So really, it was a blank. It was a blank page, and it's been a very interesting page, and that I've been filling stuff in ever since. And I think that also sort of has skewered the way that the group has been as well, um, because we've taken certain paths, and I think that also got me together with with my friend Benedict, who I met. He was the first person I met at Preston, Lancashire Polytechnic, as he was moving into the same house as where I was staying. And obviously, we couldn't have thought then that we'd be seeing each other well into the decades that we have done. But we had reggae was a, a leveler, a barometer between us. We both loved reggae, and we taught each other different artists that we loved, and then other interests sort of came from that. I would say the Velvets, Curtis Mayfield, that sort of stuff.
Is it from university then that you started a band? Is that when you knew you wanted to start a band?
Well, it was Polytechnic. It wasn't actually university at the time. It has now become some sort of university. But we never really wanted to start a band. We wanted to do music, and we actually all we would do is it was more expression rather than anything else. We lived in a very cold house in our second year. In the first year, we lived with the vicar. That was a lot warmer. But in the second year, we were in a private house that was very cold, and making music actually warmed us up and let us forget about some of the cold. We also got very, very drunk as well, which I wouldn't countenance, but that's what we did. And slowly that noise became songs, and those songs we then sort of would hear next to the groups that we were going out to see, whether it was in Manchester or Liverpool or Lancaster, or indeed in Preston itself, because there was quite a thriving musical scene actually in Preston, and we never really thought of being in a band really. Um, Slowly, then we were thinking, well, those bands are doing that, and that's not too dissimilar to what we've done. Um, and of course, we were drinking still, so it was Dutch courage really that kept us, that got us onto a stage. We are not people that burn to be on a stage. I mean, I'm not shy, but I'm certainly not one to want to go on a stage as a rule. And Ben's actually he's quite shy. So it was a bit of drinking and a bit of rock and roll, and all of a sudden we found ourselves, and we were also lucky. There was African Caribbean clubs and labour clubs around, which allowed for live music, and we did we did about 4 shows in those sort of places in Preston, and then I think we went to Nottingham University to play there, and that actually went down very well as well. So we were surprised. I think it was an element of surprise, persevering, and then getting more surprised. And then the biggest surprise was that our most southern gig that we played to date at Harlow was where we got signed to Ouija Records, um, and and then things sort of changed quite dramatically. But I'll let you ask the next question.
I was going to say, what were those early gigs like then? Did it take a bit of time to get used to playing live, or did it just come naturally? Or
Oh, nothing really comes naturally with us. It it we didn't really know what we were doing. And we would ask for the guitar to be turned up, and in his exasperation, the sound man came onto the stage, turned up Ben's amp, and walked off. And those are the sort of things that were going on. We didn't have a clue what was going on. We didn't even have equipment really. We had I had a horrible acoustic guitar, but I then, because Ben had an acoustic guitar in the second year, which he'd stolen from his mother, who was a teacher teaching with it, I then bought a bass, and it was like a three-quarter size bass, and kid's bass basically, I suppose, and with a WEM amp, which was blue and very nice. And then got a drum machine, and then a local fanzine chap listened to what we were doing and loved it, and so we got him in as a drummer, and at the same time I was talking to my brother to try to be part of it as well. So even equipment wise, we just didn't know what was going on. We were used to just making noise in a room, record it onto cassette, and that's what we did. We carried on doing that for quite a long time. No, we didn't know what the hell was going on.
What do you think it was about that gig down south then that got you signed?
We were different. We had things to say. We, um, I think, looking back on it, I think it would be obvious that we knew what music was about, and um, compared, we, as I said, well, I should have said at the end of the last question, we didn't have the equipment to know these things. Um, but the people that did have the equipment weren't saying anything, whether it was musically or vocally, as far as we were concerned. And so we were very different at the time. And one of the things that the label were about was, well, they were a Riot Girl label. Um, and so it was a very politically infused label. It was that, I mean, the Riot Girl movement, people wouldn't know about it too much nowadays, but it was a very forceful movement which gave education to people very quickly. And being talented wasn't really one of the requirements. Attitude was what it was about, and trying to say different things was also what it was about. So we fitted into that completely. In fact, you know, even though we got signed on that night, we were also then interviewed by Huggy Bear, who were the main opponents of Riot Girl in England, and affiliated obviously to the Riot Girl scene that had come over from America. So it it was, and also I'd come back. I'd had a lot of. I was an ENTS officer when I was at Polytechnic after I finished the degree, and I'd had a lot of racist shit there. So a lot of that was coming through in the music as well. Um, but yeah, we were different. We that was our role.
You mentioned you'd play music at the Polytechnic. Is that when you first started writing songs as well then?
Well, in our second year, we started to write songs. Yeah, not, but it was only songs for ourselves. It wasn't any. It was like I don't know. Um, Maybe it was like a chess game. We had a game of chess, and so writing a lyric here, and then the next person taking it up and writing another line, and it was just to keep us happy and warm. That was basically it. Uh, I don't think when we got signed, then things changed. Then it became, before that we'd written a few songs which we thought were songs, i.e., to go through a process of the of recording. Um, but before that, we'd never really recorded properly, only the cassette. Um, so actually, songwriting, you could say we were songwriting, but we weren't doing it with anything more, with anything bigger than ourselves in mind. Um, and then when we actually got to requiring some songs, I been on the label. Ben was working at a flexi disc plant in Archway, and I took over the role more of writing songs, and indeed singing them, because Ben used to sing most of the songs. Um, well, at least half the songs, and then it sort of suddenly changed because he didn't have the time to do it, possibly not the inclination, and he's not told me, but he's probably wasn't that stupid either, because I was on the dole, and when we got signed, I thought, well, we can either take this on seriously and get dropped like most of our label mates were being, was happening to our label mates, or to take it a bit more seriously and keep off the dole. And so we put a hell of a lot of hard work in. Um, and and persevered with this small label. And I think we just got better and better at what we were doing, because we got more resources around us, um, and also playing live at that sort of fetches different outlook, and we just got better as a band and moved on. And probably then we became more like any other band in a way, because we just hadn't we didn't have the same outlook as other people. We just didn't. Because we were given that opportunity, we then tried to move in that sort of being a bit more organised and being like a band, and that was good. That was successful. It worked.
What was it like recording those first two EPs?
Well, they were done in both of them were done in Preston, in the studio that we just started to use, and indeed in the studio that we still use. Only that studio has now moved to Poitiers in France, and it's a bit bigger. It was great. It was very exciting. I think John Robb produced both of those EPs, and yeah, I mean, it was always intense and always quite exciting, and always it was pretty drunk as well, but very enjoyable, and everyone enjoyed it. It was a lovely atmosphere, and it was a great time at at at, uh, at that stage. The third EP we recorded in Brighton, and that was more technology based. Using it was a friend of the drummers who was the fanzine writer, David C. It was his sister's ex-boyfriend who had the equipment, and he then left for Italy, and so I actually bought some of that equipment off him. So that moved into using technology and samplers and sequencers and computers, which was great for us. It helped us a hell of a lot.
Well, you either produced or co-produced every Cornershop album. Is that when you first started to get into the production side of things then?
Well, maybe a bit before that, because we had recorded one or two different records before that. But yes, I suppose even the cassettes that we were recording did get into that sort of production stage, and also the editing of those cassettes certainly got into the production stage, where things were looped, and cassette tapes were sent backwards, and then also mixed over each other using like double cassettes with a third auxiliary input. It it that sort of it all sort of started. There's no sort of defined time, but it would have started with the cassettes.
I think your debut album is one of your best albums. What was that time like recording and writing all around that album?
Whole Night Hurts was recorded in Peter Hook's studio in Rochdale, and again, John Robb was actually doing the production for it, but he was busy making his pastas and other things, and in the end, we decided to ask him to not produce. And in terms of recording, it was great, and again, we were creating songs that were very different and using technology and using found sounds and New York preachers and other things like that, but in Indian bells and sitar. So and a bit of Asian percussion, but we didn't feel we got exactly what we wanted for that recording at all. But we were on a small independent label, and we were stupid in thinking that we needed to save money. There was no need to save any money. We should have just done what we wanted to do. But that was our mindset. Our mindset was always small. E.F. Schumacher, small is beautiful. Keep keep things really low budget. Record it yourself. Produce yourself. Don't involve other people if you can. Keep it as small as possible. And that also, unfortunately, fed into the way that we looked at the budget of a small label. We didn't want to step on the foot of other artists, and we should have been a bit more brave, I think, there. And I think the second album was also, well, the second album was also done at West Orange in Preston. Even though we were basically all living in London by that time. And that was a big step up in terms of production and sound and technology, and I suppose songwriting as well. And that was the album that got us into America. Really, the first album was received not great in England, so we had to go to Europe to get to continue. So we toured in Europe a hell of a lot with the first album, and then the second album did very well in Europe, but also opened up America for us. And Luaka Bop, which was David Byrne's label, was what signed us. And then we get into a situation where we got into very big studios, even though we also used West Orange in Preston. And we had Dan the Automator come and produce a few tracks. We just went for everything and anything that we could. We were brave enough then. We didn't hold back on anything. We'd recorded Allen Ginsberg. We were waiting to see if we could use our rendition of Norwegian Wood. And that was quite tense, and we did get the go-ahead from both Yoko and Paul McCartney. But we'd met Sean Lennon by then in New York, and we're sure that certainly would have influenced Yoko's agreement to it. And we were starting to meet people by then, so it was a big group then.
Well, with the first album, you mentioned you were on the Riot Girl label, on a label that like supported the Riot Girl scene and stuff. You can hear like the punk and the grunge aspects of the sound in that album.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel over the years you were part of any other scenes?
Well, we actually got attributed to many scenes. I mean, there's like an Asian cool scene, Asian Britannia scene. We didn't feel any affinity to them. Obviously, Britpop scene, no affinity. Even like the more world sort of things, no real affinity to that either. So we have been pointed at for being in many different genres, but what we do is actually so it really is a reflection of our record collections. It's quite different from song to song, which has kept us continuing to be able to write songs because it keeps us on our toes and enthusiastic about what we're doing. We've not really repeated anything. So, yeah, there were a lot of scenes and we were happy to sort of sidestep them. And I think we've been quite successful in that. But having said that, if we were proud of being in any scene, it would have been the Riot Girl scene. We were, as they've mentioned, we were honorary. We're honorary members of the Riot Girl scene. Not a lot of four male in one bands can have that accolade. So we're very happy about that.
How was it received in America? Because the Riot Girl scene is an American scene, really.
Yeah.
What were the band? How were the band received when you first went over there?
Well, by the time we got there, and certainly with the second album, it was we were being played in New York, and I, I describe it as we were on the coffee tables of many places in New York, many apartments. And some people think that's not a great thing to be, but I thought it was wonderful. And we also loved the Americans that we met. We thought we were shocked. We were expecting them to be very um, closed, thick, stupid. Um, not like the erudite people that we saw, who were very forward thinking. And yeah, we loved it. We loved America, and they loved us.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, your most commercially successful album is When I Was Born for the Seventh Time.
Hmm.
How do you look back at that album?
Well, it's very nice to look back to. It my mother passed away whilst that was happening. Sleep on the Left Side is really about my mother. Um, we we just went for everything. As I said, we were open to. Well, we've always been open to things, but I suppose other people were open to letting us just get on with it in a bigger budget manner. Yeah, very. It was lovely recording it. It was very relaxed and laid back. And Philip Bagnall at East Coast Studios was. We did Good to Be on the Road. That was the first song we did with Philip. That was just me and Benedict. Uh, and when he heard that, he'd not heard that sort of stuff for a long, long time. So he was totally on board. And this is someone who's recorded a hell of a lot of artists, and that sort of stuff rubs off on you. You do feel you feel something's happening, and you sort of you go with that. Um, yeah, it was the actual recording was very good. Again, we did go back to West Orange and do some stuff there as well. Um, and those sort of things give us time to reflect on what we were doing. But we thought it was a very varied, very compelling album, and so did everyone who heard it. It went down very well in London because that was the first time we'd actually done well in England. We'd always had to go somewhere else. So to have tea with our producers was quite a nice thing, and there was definitely something was going down with that album. I mean, Brimful. We thought that was a great song, so we put it out as a single. It didn't even have bass on that track, but we thought it was good, and sometimes we had friends who thought it was the weakest track on the album, but we didn't. We put it out, and obviously then, the same that in America as well. We were touring with that album, and we'd worked our way up to this behemoth of a country where you do things only work themselves up very slowly and with a lot of effort and touring and interviews, and we were getting there. That album got Spin Album's end of year #1 album of the year, and we were very happy that all of the work that we were doing was paying off. And then the remix actually sort of it it paid to all the good work that we'd done in a certain way, and it made people focus on us with just that one mix, which is a brilliant mix, and it's a lovely track, and it's continued, and so it should. And but as a group, it sort of it cut our wings a little. and I say that because we think that the next album, Hand Cream for a Generation, was even better than this album. And we put everything into that. I put everything into that album. But by then, when even you got even the record label thinking, well, they won't do anything better than that, and it was very unfortunate. It was a two-edged sword with Brimful doing so well.
Well, I wanted to ask about the remix actually because that version is a sped up version, obviously compared to the original. So when people were discovering the band or waiting for another album, like you say, were they expecting the band to sound like that all the time?
Um, no, no, they weren't. I mean, we never gave any opportunity to think that we were moving in that direction ourselves at all. That was just the mix. Um, but it just took a lot of the shine off the album as such, unfortunately, because it was massive and it was massive in most countries. So, which is great. You can't really knock that. But it's in terms of what I've said in the run up to this question, we if we were to be represented by, there's lots of different songs in our catalogue that we love much more than that track. But if we were to be represented by one song, why not the song that talks about record collecting, that has politics in it, that has different artists name checked from France, Jamaica, India, America, even Britain, maybe. It's and a song that is upbeat, as that is. It's a good song that represents us. But unfortunately, there's a lot more to represent about us, and so that's actually why we've always persevered to keep on recording, because we feel that we feel it's all good stuff, and it will be found out any year soon.
It is a brilliant song, the original and the remix. Can you remember writing the song and how it came about?
Yeah, I was living. I'd moved to London because I had to, on pain of death. Well, on pain of the death of a relationship if I didn't. Um, and we were living in Archway, and I mean, it was a very meager existence, and it was very. It was a time I'd stopped drinking actually, because I needed to get on with stuff. So I completely stopped drinking. Or had I? I don't know. No, I think it started. It started. Oh, maybe I was still drinking when it started. But I'd get up and walk into Kentish Town, and then go to a pub, and then maybe another pub, and maybe the library. And that was really my days at that time. And then I remember writing some of the lyrics to it, and that would have been about 94, and also the guitar to it as the lyrics were done. But it took a long time to put all those references in. It took a long time to shaper it, months, years, in fact. Um, and and then I remember when we were recording Butter the Soul the next day, so we were in Preston on the London Road, and we went through Butter the Soul a little, and I think that was when we were recording, when we'd just done Jalandhar as well. Because Butter the Soul was a bit different to the second album, but I think it was done earlier. And so we didn't put it out as a single straight away, Butter the Soul. But then we went through the first rendition of Brimful as a group anyway. Everyone liked it. So so that was good. But it was it was good and people liked it, but everything was good and the band liked it at that stage. Whether it was something that would scratch in like Butter the Soul or something that was country like Good to Be on the Road Back Home. Um, so I think that's when things are quite healthy, that you can just do everything and anything and it all sounds pretty good. I mean, yeah, with people saying, "Oh, yeah, you've got your own sound," and really, I've never really thought of it as our own sound, but people grab that, even though the songs are very different. For them, there's a basic feeling or notion that they have when they listen to us.
I would say I've got your own sound because there's not many bands in the 90s that will play that sort of music and bring in the Indian aspect of music.
In terms of what we did, I don't think there was. No, I mean, a lot of people have used Asian elements in the past, but they've not used noise to sort of, and that noise was to represent Asians aren't exactly what you think they are, and it came naturally. It didn't. It wasn't dreamt up in a boardroom. Um, it was dreamt up in a drinking hole. Uh, yeah, I think yeah, we were. There wasn't anyone doing what we were doing, and I don't think there is now. And a lot of American bands were trying to do even cover versions of songs like ours, and they all end up, whether they're Indian or the English songs, they all end up sounding a bit sort of Boy Scouts or the American equivalent of that um, campfire sort of things, which is lovely in a way, but also maybe it's another reason why we are different. That people didn't they didn't sound like us.
Like you say as well, that's the music is different aspects of your life and the other band members' life, so it's real to you. Like if you go and copy it, it's not going to have that same feeling, is it?
If you go where, sorry?
If somebody's copying
Oh,
your
it's coffee.
sound,
Yeah,
it's not the same
yeah,
as feeling it properly.
yeah. I mean, in a way, that's lovely. It's a lovely rejoicing of the individuality of people, that people go in different directions, and that's one of the things that I think life has been for me in particular. I've always in the 90s, music was thriving. It was part of our everyday. It was clothing. You got up and you listened to music. It influenced what you wore. It influenced who you met. It influenced where you went out. It influenced a hell of a lot of things about your own demeanor. Nowadays, I don't think there is that. Music does very well in its own spheres, but there's not that. You don't wear it on your lapel as much as you did. Well, you walked it. You don't just have it on your lapel. In the 90s, that's what it was about.
But like you say there, there's no bands or acts now really that have got their own style that people latch onto, is there?
I think it's slowly been sort of syringed out of the whole equation. I mean, there are people that are doing wonderful stuff. There's no doubt about that. But even when we were using technology, we knew that if in a few years, it's going to be the same software, whatever country you're in. So that's going to take away a lot of the differential factor. It's going to be the same samples. It's going to be the same technology and outboard or software plugins, and that is going to flatten the whole horizon somewhat. And that's unfortunately that has happened. There's still a bit of room for people doing things differently, but not as much as the limitations of people not having the same technology had when we were doing it.
It's like if you look at the charts now, it is not everything about it seems to be manufactured, like the style of the bands, the music, like you were saying there. Like
Mm.
there's not, I don't know, it seems like there's not something there different for people to follow in the main charts in the public eye. Not like there's a lot of good underground bands, but I mean,
Yeah. Well, you know, it is a business, it's an industry. I don't think it helps not having the amount of music shows that we used to have on
Yeah.
TVs. That really has helped kill it. The There's not the, and people used to, they used to live for Tuesdays, not Wednesdays. The music magazines were out on Wednesday. Three music magazines. People used to live for them, and they'd go out. And if you were in London, you'd get it on a Tuesday from some store holders, and it people read it from the front to the back, and then maybe two or three times before they passed it on. And there's not that. There's more enthusiasm for a cup of coffee, whatever that coffee may be called, and some sourdough bread, than there is to the music that people listen to whilst they're eating that stuff nowadays. Um, the the value of money of music has has gone down, which is unfortunate because we kept our step to it. That music was the cracks in the pavement. Music was our metronome, and there doesn't seem to be that much enthusiasm for it. Maybe computer games are I don't know. Maybe they're the next thing that keep the youth striding. I don't know.
With When I Was Born for the Seventh Time, the album finishes with Norwegian Wood that you mentioned before.
Hmm.
You mentioned that you grew up in a household of mainly Asian music, and George
Hmm.
Harrison brought in that Indian music style into the band, and in a song like Norwegian Wood. So when the Beatles are incorporating this music, was that a good thing for the Asian community to hear this aspect in a British band?
I think it was more than good. It was wonderful. In the same sense that when we saw something on television and there was a chap on it that had a turban, we were we were all happy. It was a wonderful thing to see. Um, it was a breaking down of things, and there was a lot of respect for not just George, but certainly George, but for people to be using Asian elements was a wonderful thing.
Your next album was you mentioned Hand Cream for a Generation. Did you prefer that album to Born for the Seventh Time?
I personally did, and I thought when you got songs like Lessons Learned from Rocky One to Rocky Three, that's just like there's no way that any record label should not have got that into the charts, and the only way you can do that is by not wanting it to work. I mean that song works. It works now.
It's a good song.
Yeah. So there's that. There's the reggae song that we did, Motion 11. Um, yeah, and then I'm working with Otis Clay to do the opener and the start and the end track. Um, it, it there's a lot of life in that album, and it's all there in one vinyl or two. Might have been a double vinyl, but yeah. So I certainly did think that should have done a hell of a lot better.
You took a break from was it '97 to that album with Cornershop?
Yeah. Well, it was hardly a break. It was actually just recording. Um, we stayed in different places. Leeds was one of them.
Oh, really?
As well, I stayed in Leeds, and it was all about going out. In Leeds, it was about going out in the day, going to the charity shops and the record shops, collating a few bits of vinyl, going back to the hotel and listening to it and making songs out of the stuff. We were in a house on the Thames for a while. I was in Paris for a good few months. Um, so no, it wasn't really a break. It was just getting on with recording an album that had to live up to what had been Spin Album's #1 of the year. And quite frankly, I think we did it.
You,
That other people possibly didn't is of no consequence to me.
I know that you obviously don't want to live off of Brimful of Asher, but when you're riding that wave with a #1 song
Mm.
and a great album that did well, and then you wait 5 years for another album, do you think that hindered it a bit? Like if you'd have released it a year after, do you think it'd have finished higher in the charts or done more better commercially?
Well, actually, I'm just thinking about it. What actually happened was, yes, when I was born was followed up by Hand Cream for a Generation. But actually, in the middle of it, we also did an offshoot of Clinton, which we were doing in parallel since '94. We did an album called Disco and the Halfway to Discontent. Now, we could have ridden a lot more on what had happened with the album and certainly indeed the single and got back to it and done another album. But we felt we'd burnt out a little, but also needed to sort of get things together again. And part of doing that was doing the Clinton album, and the second part of doing it was to come back with an album that we thought was convincing enough to release after when I was born. So yeah, there was no letting up at all. What it was continuing with what we felt and how we wanted to do things. And that was, I mean, Clinton is only two of us. It was only just me and Ben, and that's what we did next. That's how we felt about it. That was on the cards a little while um, before when I was born for the seventh time, and that's what we did.
Did you enjoy that time with in Clinton doing this different album?
Yeah, it was it was very different in terms of technology and approach, but it was great to be in the studio and concentrate on ways of making music that we'd slowly got into since our third release when we started using a sampler. Um, and again, it was very political as well. And actually, well, "People Power" in the Disco Hour was then actually used as a song for on the Cornershop album as well. Um, but really, we saw Clinton as the more technology based laboratory that then informed Cornershop in the more technology based songs. Um, but yeah, it was. I think it's always been lovely. Recording is a lovely thing. We don't really tour anymore. We do still just about record. That's we've always felt a lot happier in the studio. Cups of tea.
Do you prefer like the process of coming up with songs rather than playing them?
Um, no, it's not that. It's just we the studio environment for us is just nice and relaxed and laid back, and when and most of the time quite exciting because we do quite well. Most of the songs that we've ever done, we've seen through to fruition, and we've been very lucky like that. We've not had much stuff that we thought, well, we can't continue with that. It's generally been it's been there with everything that we've done, but we hardly waste anything.
You mentioned before you had to like with the first couple of albums, you had to go to different continents and sort of start again. When you
Mm.
did when Brimful of Asher was doing well, like at #1, and the album was doing well, and you've got this like worldwide fame. Then, what was that like going from like an indie kind of underground band to this shooting up to everybody knowing who you are?
Um, it was very different. Um, yeah, it's weird walking into a room and everyone knows who you are and you don't know who they are. Also, because um, because I've got a darker hue than Ben, he didn't get any of that. He could walk around and no one would say boo to a goose to him. Um, but with me, it was different. So it took. It's quite difficult, and it does change you. And I know that because when I got out of it, I felt a hell of a lot more relaxed. Um, yeah, I mean, the thing with when I was born also then brought up a lot of contractual stuff that needed to be done, and that's another reason we couldn't I couldn't move. I was it was a very stressful time for me, and it shouldn't have been stressful at all, at all. There was nothing but goodness in terms of the music, in terms of what the band had done, in terms of the goodwill that the band had given the label, in terms of how much the band had toured. There should have been nothing. There should have been petals and flowers and garlands, and there wasn't. There was a lot of fucking stress.
You mentioned you felt like you'd burnt out. Did that contribute a lot to it then?
That was it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that was it on the back of touring around America. You see, when you're young, those sort of things are some you can see them as a privilege. Wow, I'm off to Berlin, I'm off to bloody hell, I'm off to Detroit. But it takes a toll on you that you cannot estimate. And then when only when you're through all that, you look back and think, actually, I was going around the world, yes, but I was going around with for some other people, not really myself. Um, and that's the that's why musicians get paid because they have to go through that shit.
Yeah. Were you pretty naive to that when you started out then, do you think?
Not really, not at all. No, my degree was in business information technology. Um, no, I wasn't. I wasn't even that green to contractual work. But when people are there to screw you over and to tell you that it's raining when they're pissing on your head, it's a different world. Bamboozled. It's colonial stuff. It's everything that was learned from working in the colonies. The music industry has it. That's why I've always loved the music industry because it has things first. So whatever fuck ups are going to happen, the music industry generally employs them. If it's technology, they generally employ technology first. If it's multimedia, whatever, they generally employ it. So it's always exciting in the music industry. If it's social and it's doing well, music industry is there. It was the forebearer of all of those sort of things. And yeah, there we are.
Well, you started your own record label. Was that part of it to just get away from that side of things?
Well, we'd been through small labels and medium labels and large labels at that time. Um, and yes, to continue, we decided to do our own label. Um, and we did also put other artists out, but with lockdown, we sort of stopped that. We put a few things out, which we love. We still love them, and we're very happy we did that. And now we concentrate more on just our own releases. And we're in. My son is now 23. He does his own label. In fact, he does two labels, and he does drum and bass nights and promotes them, and he does everything. He's done radio. He's done. So really, it's a way. We're at a stage now where it's a lot of what we do. My son certainly does it. Um, and it's good to see, but it is a bit where we can just take it easy a bit more, and the baton is definitely passed over.
After Hand Cream for a Generation came my favourite corner shop album, Judy Sucks a Lemon for Breakfast. What was that whole album like looking back at it now?
Yeah, I really love that album. Um, that was the first album I think we did that we weren't on. We weren't anything to do with the Medium label that we were on before. Um, yeah, it was actually it's quite weird. I mean, when I stopped doing the when Hand Cream for a Generation did its course, I then stopped, and um, I was doing a music. I was doing a film which I'd never done before. Just recording it as a documentary about the music industry, which I have nearly finished. Um, and I think I also then started in 2003 doing the Bubbly Core stuff. So the Bubbly Core stuff was done, um, probably recorded before Judy Sucks Lemon for breakfast, I think, or most of it was, but it wasn't released till 2013 or something, or 2011. I think it's 13. So there was a lot of stuff going on in the background, but it wasn't necessarily coming out in the same order.
Well, the next three albums were collaborations. Did you enjoy collaborating on these albums?
Well, we've always sort of collaborated. We we as I mentioned earlier, we certainly collaborated with Hungry for a Generation. Um, the Bubbly Core one was obviously a collaboration with Bubbly Core. And then actually, because a lot of tracks are done with other people, were there, it was decided to put that out as an album that that was a compilation album, with other artists, which was called Urban Turban. And then we flicked the switch on that and made sure that there was no collaboration with other artists for England is a Garden, um, to get away from the idea of working with other people or named artists. So that was the difference with that album, and then gave me something to think about. Um, and so the last album, I think I've mentioned all of them, was England is a Garden. That was recorded. Well, it was released just before lockdown, so we were lucky enough to have vinyl copies made just before lockdown really kicked in, and COVID got a lot worse. Um, and so that album did quite well because not a lot of releases were happening at that around that time, and I think it was very reflective of what England had gone through. Um, its transition to Brexit, though Brexit's not mentioned itself, and also it was quite upbeat. So for a time when people were in their houses, it did very well.
Well, I was going to ask that. It was brought out just before lockdown and it was well received, but I was going to ask if lockdown did have any effect on the album.
I think for us it was okay. It was okay because we didn't. We'd already got the vinyl copies before things had kicked in. Um, I'd been to, I think it was Amsterdam, and did some interviews there just beforehand. And that was when people were wearing masks. And then after that, I think a week or so after that, it was getting into total lockdown. Not for us, of course, not for the UK. That came later, but for other countries that were a bit more with it.
Are you happy with that album then?
Yeah, very happy. Love the cover. Love the songs. Um, it stays with what we are. It's the backbone is with the same group, and so anything that does that is always great. Um, it's yeah, I think it's the variety of songs are great. I think there's probably too many songs on it. Looking back on it,
I read somewhere you wrote 40 songs, is that right? And you got to pick from the 40.
um, I I wouldn't have written 40, but certainly I would have started quite a few songs. And what then happened was that there was so many ideas and songs started that I had to just draw a line underneath the songs that were more likely to get finished or were indeed finished. Um, Else, otherwise, we would have just carried on. Because if you are on your own label, you do have your own time, and if you don't put too much constraints on yourself, which we don't, then it can sort of it can get carried away with the years. And also, we've all got families, except for our percussionist, but he has his percussion. Um, so we've got other things that we get on with. Um, but yeah, a line had to be drawn, and and yeah, very very happy with that album.
Do you think you write your best songs when you've got constraints on you? Like if you say we're going to do an album whenever and you've got to write songs for that time, is that sometimes where your best work?
I think it's a good thing. I miss that. I miss it. I miss the idea that you you've got to get something down, and also it also means that you're working and there's a lot more people around you that are relying on you as well, which is also why you do these things. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Not having the constraints is is problematic. It really is. Um, because things can just linger and continue and continue. And being rather candid with you, I suppose the next album, which I'm doing now, has also suffered that sort of yeah
So are these songs that for this album you're doing now, are these
yeah.
songs some of these like 5 year old these songs then?
Um, Not really. Um, well, some of them may be 5 years, but most of them are a bit more fresh than that. But I have lived in Longleg for far too long, and I have sort of not been watching the game a little. But still, very happy with how things are sounding, and all I can do is carry on, persevere.
You mentioned you've done a documentary that should be finished soon. You've
Oh
got,
no, I didn't say it was finished. Nearly finished, but I've really put that on. Well, the thing is, with that documentary, it's about music being made in the analog age, and um, it's got interviews with very many different aspects of the music industry, whether that's Everett True, whether that's John Peel, whether that's looking at a record pressing plant, whether that's looking at the way that the Americans were doing it at that time, and behind that is the idea of the technology that's been used at that time, because we were about to lose it all, and about 3 months after the record pressing plant was filmed, that it went down. I think another consortium came in and put it back on its feet again. Obviously, John Peel's not with us. Everett True is no longer. Everett True is actually. Uh, he went to Australia. Last time I heard Everett True's voice was when he was giving my son a lecture on via Zoom link or something like that. We thought we know this voice, of this lecturer, and it's ever true. But things have changed, and so that film, hopefully, as the years.
And you mentioned you recorded a new album. I'm sure you're not too sure when that's going to be out yet.
No, no, we haven't even thought about that. No, um, no, it'll just be um, whenever it's ready. I don't think there's any bigger game plan than that. But as to when it's ready, we don't know.
What is life like for you now these days, then, aside from these projects?
For me personally, uh, well, it's pretty good. I feel quite privileged to have done what I've done. Um, I can't really get away from doing it either because I am reminded all the time. Um, I think I don't. I think I could have done more in life, and I've taken many. I've stepped off the pedal quite a lot, but I don't think. But maybe that's too easy because it does take its toll. Being in a band, recording, um, people take their toll on you. Um, but I've got two lovely sons. I live in London. I go to France very often, and I'm still here. Quite frankly, that's the biggest thing. I'm still here. The the industry doesn't particularly care for having people still here, and luckily I am.
Well, exactly, yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, so thank you so much for joining me, Ginger. It's been brilliant to speak to you. Like you said, you've got a great back catalogue of songs, and hopefully this new album, whenever it's out, will be just as good. No pressure.
No, no, no. Not, well, yes. When it comes, it'll come. But I am. I'm also very proud of the catalogue as well because I don't think many people would have would have come out with things like that. Maybe they wouldn't want to. I don't know.
It is a brilliant back catalogue. Like that, "Born for the Seventh Time" album is the commercially more successful. But like I said, my favourite's Judy Sucks 11 for Breakfast, and I'm sure people have got other favourites and stuff. So
Yeah.
although you can look at Brimful of Asher and that when I was born for the seventh time, there is other great stuff there as well.
Yeah. Well, it's also nice to have album titles like that and get them out there.
Well, how do you come with the album titles? Like, where did they come from? Some of them.
They just come. They're just from I don't know. They're just there. I don't know. They just come.
Are you constantly writing as well, like little bits?
That's a good question. Not as much as I used to. I mean, in olden days, I'm talking last century, one would have a beer mat and a pen. I've always liked technology because that was where I did my course in technology, and I've always been an adopter of being able to use the word processor anywhere you can go. And I love working in a cafe. I edit in cafes. Um, I like I like using technology to help me. But I think as you get older, before it used to, you'd wake up and maybe you'd wake up in the middle of the night and you'd be thinking on lyrics and you'd wake up to write those lyrics down on the wall if you had to. But um, as you get older and other things come into view, and then it is difficult to write at times and to wait for ideas to come. But that's always the exciting thing when ideas come. So you can't push those things. You can just wait.
when you write songs, do you like lock yourself away? Because there's a photo on Cornershop's Instagram. I'm not sure where it is, but it looks like a bedroom or a spare room, and it's you and your brother-in-law. And on the caption, it says that you'd wrote some of the biggest songs in that room.
Oh no, that was the bedroom.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, that was our bedroom. The bed's next to us, I think, in that picture. But no, I don't like the whole beauty of writing is to not be locked away and to be able to do it whilst you're walking down the road or walking the dog or that's why I like music. That's why I don't necessarily like writing a book or anything like that because it's a lot of effort. Um, Whereas you can take songs with you wherever you go. Books are not the same thing. You have to maybe be in the mindset to do those sort of things. But yeah, I think as one gets older, it does get a little more difficult.
Yeah, I understand what you say. Like you say, you've got back in the day, you could have stayed in all day, wrote songs, and done whatever. But now, with a family and stuff, there's more priorities, isn't there?
Different priorities, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And times change. You know, with you as a writer, I think whatever you write, even if it's a manual for some for a food blender, you have to put you're in a certain time, and you have to. And when that time moves, then you have to readjust on how you go about things. Sometimes you have to do that, um, and 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 then you start thinking of psychology and other things come into it, and all of a sudden, not just writing, because you've had a drink or something. You're writing, and those things around you have to. They will come and sit next to you every now and then, and you have to think about the wider things. Um, what I mean to say is that as we go through life, there's you start thinking as to why you should write, and let alone what you should write. So there are a lot of things come into play as you get older, and and even that itself is makes complications.
but yeah, thank you again for joining me. It's been great to speak to you and hear
Oh no, thank
all
you.
about your career.
No, well, it's been lovely to talk.